We're back talking about whether America is a Christian nation. I'm with David Barton from Wall Builders and Annie Laurie Gaylor from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Now, before we went to the break, Annie Laurie charged Dave with making some bogus quotes. Dave, how do you respond to that?
I'll be happy to. Number one, you got to wait.
Yes, tell us about those, Mr. Barton.
Would you let me tell him? You asked me to, so back off. Number one, you've gotten away from the substance that Lee asked about. Now you're into name calling. Number two, there is never a bogus quote I've used. Every quote I've used has a footnote to it. I made the decision that I would no longer quote professors. I would quote original documents. Now you go get that book. You look at every quote. It has a footnote to it. But the problem was I didn't want to quote professors from 1950. I wanted to quote founding fathers. Now, you brought up the issue of the Treaty of Tripoli between George Washington and John Adams. Here's the original state papers that contain it. And people like you stop after the first clause. It's treaty with a Muslim nation. It says the government of the United States is in no sense founded on the Christian religion. That's where you stop. The rest of the clause says, as it has an inherent hostility toward the Muslim religion. They said, guys, we're not Europe. We're not Spain. We're not Portugal. We're not Italy. We don't hate you because you're Muslims. We're not that kind of a Christian nation. It does not say we're not a Christian nation. It says we're not a Christian nation that has an inherent hatred toward Muslims. That's a big difference. But you guys put a period in the middle of the sentence. This is the original treaty right here. I mean, that's what it says.
Let's let her respond. Go ahead, Annie Laurie.
There is no argument that he has made that this is a Christian nation, that our government is Christian. The only argument he has come up with is that a majority of people profess some form of Christianity. A majority of Americans, by the way, do not go to church. But that would be like saying this is a white nation because a majority of Americans are white or are not of other races. Why would somebody want to make a statement like that?
You resort to racism when you can't win on substance.
What does it matter, David, if indeed we have these Christian roots? How should it influence society today?
There's several things. Number one, a theocracy is God ruling a nation. I don't think God's going to come down and run on any ballot. Number two, I'm not in favor of abolishing the Constitution. I work really hard for that document. I like that document, so that's nonsense. I don't want a theocracy. But I do want the ability of the people to have their roots expressed.
Okay, Annie Laurie, what's your fear over all of this?
My fear is that people like Mr. Barton have a very obvious agenda, which is that they want to distort the history of the founding of our country and our Constitution. They're unhappy with the fact that it is secular, and they are clutching at straws and making bogus arguments, and it's disinformation. It's very harmful. The quotes, these bogus quotes that Mr. Barton had floated around for years, are still out there on the Internet and in letters to the editor, misquoting Jefferson and Madison and you name it, and distorting people's perception of history. And I think that if he were honest, he would be saying, you know, I support separation of church and state. I want to make sure that I do not distort the record. And I think it's interesting that he hasn't commented on the fact that he was paid by the GOP to go preach in churches. Now, what were you doing there, Mr. Barton?
Well, number one, you get your facts wrong. I was paid by the GOP to go do rallies. I didn't preach in churches for the GOP. Whether you believe it or not, I do believe in some form of separation of church and state, but not a secularization of society. I don't want the church running government. I don't want the government running the church. But I don't think that means we have a secular society. So that's where you're wrong. That is nonsense. Yes, I was paid by the GOP. I did rallies across the country. But I was not paid to go into churches, and that's a long way off. And by the way, I challenge you to find any bogus quote that I've used that you claim that does not have a footnote documented back to a source.
What is secular? When you say a secular country, David, what is it you don't like about that idea?
We have the greatest freedom in the world because we've been a Christian nation, but not a coercive Christian nation. I believe the truth wins out. I believe in free speech. I support her right to be wrong. I think she's wrong. I support her right to say what she wants to say. I don't have trouble with that. I have trouble when she tells me that I cannot have my right of free speech, the kind of suits she's been involved with on their website. That doesn't represent mainstream America. That's a very intolerant view of my beliefs. I'll let her have her beliefs, but I don't think she should force hers on me.
Okay, Annie Laurie, are you intolerant?
No, the Freedom from Religion Foundation has been leading the way in challenging President Bush's faith-based initiative, and our most recent lawsuits, which we have won, have stopped funding a profoundly sectarian, exclusionary organization such as Mentor Kids in Arizona, in which the mentors had to be church-going, fundamentalist Christians who signed a mission statement that they believed only in creationism. And we stopped that funding. of federal money for faith-based purposes. But
Annie
this is what's
Laura
going
earlier
on.
brought up the Treaty of Tripoli. A treaty she didn't bring up was Jefferson's treaty with the Kaskaskia Indians. Here it is, 1803. Jefferson did this treaty, signed by him at the bottom. In this treaty, Thomas Jefferson, now Jefferson gave federal money to pay for missionaries to evangelize the Indians, and Jefferson gave federal funds to build churches so that when the Indians became evangelized, they'd have a place to worship. That's not faith-based funding. That's direct federal funding by Thomas Jefferson. She needs to read the other treaties in that book. She's got part of one treaty, but not the others.
Thomas Jefferson, who said we should question with boldness even the existence of a God, who rejected the Bible, who cut it up because he did not believe most of it was the words of Jesus, who said it was like going through a sewer to find a gem, to find something good in the Bible, and who said that the First Amendment erects a wall of separation between church and state. Thomas Jefferson, who was the person who demanded that we have a Bill of Rights. He was somebody who ardently
Jefferson
believed
was
in
in France. Jefferson said he did nothing with the Bill of Rights. Thomas Jefferson was not in the nation when the Constitution was done and the Bill of Rights was done. He himself said he had nothing to do with it. He himself said he had nothing to do with the Bill of Rights.
I think Annie Laurie, maybe you're right. We are in two nations here, at least two very strong viewpoints on both sides of this issue. Thank you both for coming on Faith Under Fire and expressing your perspective on this thing.
Our pleasure, Lee. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie Laurie, as well. We're going to be right back on Faith Under Fire.